services to immigrants and refugees. The inescapable conclusion was we can't answer the question whether immigrants are a boon or a burden. The facts simply don't exist. In our editorial today, Dick Marsh said, it's time for the state to establish an independent agency to collect data on immigrants and refugees. He said it's necessary to replace demagoguery with debate. Tonight we begin. Our moderator is record managing editor Ricardo Pimentel. Thank you.
Good evening. Buenas tardes. Let me introduce the panelists we have tonight. On your far left, first is Kathy Nelson Turner. She is with us from FAIR, California, a national nonprofit public interest organization of concerned citizens working for immigration reform. The Federation for American Immigration Reform, FAIR, generates public support to combat illegal immigration and establish reasonable levels of legal immigration. Kathy joined FAIR in August 1991 to help set up its new California office. FAIR now has 3 offices in California: Sacramento, San Diego, and Los Angeles. Kathy's background with immigration began with her father, Alan C. Nelson, when he served as commissioner of the Immigration and Naturalization Service from 1982 to 1989. Next to her is Don Parsons. He is the treasurer for the local Republican Central Committee. He owns his own business, Strategic Research, a marketing, public relations, and government advocacy firm. He graduated from the University of Pacific with a degree in business in 1979. Don has been active in Republican politics here since 1985. He is on the board of directors for the Boy Scouts here. Welcome, Don. Elena Mangajas arrived from the Philippine Islands 13 years ago. She is a journalism graduate and was in social science research with the University of the Philippines before her decision to petition for immigration to the United States. She has worked for the last 10 years in employment and training programs. She was a job developer and job counselor for Southeast Asian refugees for 3 years, and currently, in her job with the Private Industry Council, she continues to provide job training assistance to youth and economically disadvantaged folks here in the county. Elena combines cultural understanding with her work because she believes it's important to nourish the diversity in our culture. Arturo Ocampo is a staff attorney with the California Rural Legal Assistance, an organization that provides free legal services to low-income people in San Joaquin County. Arturo was born in Mexicali, Mexico. He came to this country at the tender age of 6 months. He grew up in Salinas, California, the son of farm and construction laborers. He got his law degree from Bolt Hall, UC Berkeley, in 1983. He joined CRLA also in 1983. He says he's here to try to dispel some myths about documented and undocumented immigrants. So let's start. We're going to start with some questions, and I'm going to address these to all the panelists, and we'll start with Kathy. Let's pretend you have a ledger in front of each of you. On one side is the word disadvantages, and on the other is the word benefits. Would each of you take a moment to briefly tell me what you think the disadvantages and benefits of immigration, legal or undocumented, are? Kathy?
Ricardo, I think you need to make the important distinction in looking in disadvantages and advantages or benefits of immigration to make the distinction between legal and illegal immigration. I'll start out with benefits. Benefits of legal immigration, well, that we have people sitting here tonight because 97% of us are immigrants. I think the important distinction there is that we're legal immigrants and that we've come in via the process. The disadvantage, I would say illegal immigration, that people are coming in violation of our federal laws, breaking our laws, undercutting our system and our heritage of legal immigration. And I think that's a good starting point.
Okay. Don, benefits, disadvantages?
One of the things that makes this country strong, in my opinion, is the diversity of the population. I agree with Kathy in sharing some concerns about people who come into the country illegally. You can't fault folks for trying to make a better life for themselves and for their families. Certainly that's a difficult thing to argue with for anyone. But from the standpoint of disadvantages, I think there's a threshold at which, or rate at which, we can continue to assimilate people into the state and continue to meet the costs associated with taking care of the population.
What kind of costs are those, Don?
Well, we've talked about several. The series talked about the medical costs, welfare costs, the economic side of the ledger. When you start talking about advantages and disadvantages, the figures are muddled, and it's a little hard to get a handle on what the actual costs, benefits are. But in terms of disadvantages, certainly there are expenses which are recognized and undeniable, if you want to call them that.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Elena, benefits, disadvantages. Oh.
Thank you. I'm glad we're starting on the right note here, talking about, as Kathy had said, the difference between legal and illegal immigrants. I think that's a very vital note for all of us to focus on. The reason is that the arguments will depend on the distinction that we will make between legal and illegal. I speak for legal immigration here, and the advantage is something that we all, many of us in the audience, have already experienced. We have started a new life. We have an adopted country, and we have made good. We have contributed to this country. I'm saying things that have already been said, but we had a reason for coming here, and certainly by all measures we have tried our utmost best to assimilate in this society and be part of its so-called diversity. What more, how else could that go wrong? But the kind of discussion that we are entering right now is that there is a combination of the legal and illegal terminology here, so that all the things that the legal immigrants have built in the past is just now shoved together with a controversy and the conflicting statistics about the burden, the so-called burden that has been caused by the illegal immigrants. So in answer to Ricardo's question, if I were to speak before a crowd and tell you what the disadvantage is. The disadvantage at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, still has to be accounted for.
Thank you, Elena. Arturo.
Thank you. Although I agree there is some distinction between undocumented and documented immigrants, the reality is that the undocumented immigrant tends to be a greater benefit to the country because the undocumented immigrant cannot access any of the public benefits that legal immigrants can access. The undocumented immigrant is easier to take advantage of. The employer can pay him sub-minimum wage, and the person isn't going to complain. The undocumented worker, for example, is unlikely to report an employer for not providing field sanitation. Collectively, immigrants, both legal and documented and undocumented, all the studies have indicated that they are a benefit to the United States. For example, the Julian Simon, The Economic Consequences of Immigration, 1989, stated that in 1990, American Immigration Institute survey of economists, ex-presidents of the American Economic Association and then members of the Council of Economic Advisors, 4 out of 5 said that immigrants had a favorable impact on economic growth. None said that immigrants had an adverse impact on economic growth. Both legal and undocumented immigrants have a positive benefit to this country in terms of the economy, as well as the adversity and diversity of our nation. On the bad side, the only bad side is the fact that the undocumented worker and the recent immigrant tend to be victims of a lot of false information that's provided by individuals like Governor Wilson and other groups like FAIR.
Is this on? Okay, let me just play devil's advocate here. On one side are folks like Arturo, who say immigrants contribute mightily to the society. On the other are folks who say they represent somewhat of a drain. Let me just play devil's advocate. We're in the midst of a pretty deep and persistent recession here in California. Jobs are scarce. State and local resources are strained to just provide basic services. In this kind of climate, is any amount of immigration, undocumented or not, practical or desirable? Are there acceptable levels? Let's start with you, Don.
Actually, that's probably a better question asked of Kathy than me, because certainly her group is more interested in dealing with limits. From the standpoint of the governor's proposal, this is focused on illegal immigration and an attempt to address the question of our borders, particularly the border with Mexico, and in trying to establish guidelines for dealing with this question in a rational way.
Okay, why don't we give it to Kathy? Kathy, are there limits?
I think there are limits, and I think that we need to recognize a couple things, that the frontier is settled, that the population of the world is increasing by about 90 million people a year. It's 182 people a minute. And California population right now is at 30 million plus. At current growth rates, we're growing at a rate of a third world country. We're going to be at 50 million in year 2015, excuse me. The question is, how many people can we afford to maintain our social welfare net for? Can we provide services for those who are here legally and the citizens here? The question is, how many people can the United States hold? How many people can California hold? In the 1990s, we're going to accept 15 million legal immigrants legally to the United States. That's not including illegal immigration. 1/3 of them will come to California, to the Golden State. Are we going to be able to provide services? I noticed Stockton is declared by the Department of Labor as a substantially unemployed area, which means that their figures are 20% above unemployment of the unemployment rates of the nation. Is Stockton, are the taxpayers of Stockton going to be able to provide the services? I think that's where we need to address. So yes, there are limits, and that's what we need to address.
Elena.
I'm listening closely, Kathy, but I'm being very careful about listening to remote projections. This is a scare tactic that's being used on us, that if the population increases, this is what's going to happen. And in defining population, we're talking about immigrants, legal or illegal. Again, watch the terminology that's being used here. What is happening is that California is becoming a magnet. And so, in order to solve this economic situation, this thing comes up. The solution that we should present in this kind of argument is that do not use the immigrants, the number of immigrants, to solve the situation. To discuss this matter. Look at the other aspects of why we have come to this situation.
Are you saying don't blame economic woes on immigrants?
Do not blame the economic woes of California to the immigrant group. And I think this is what's happening. And again, let me bring you back to the terminology that's being used here, because now the people emotionally are in a psychological state are worried about their future, their jobs, the economic condition of the state they live in. And so you're being told that. You know what's causing that? There's too many immigrants here, and your tax money is not going to the right services for the welfare of your county or your state.
Let me just skip back to Kathy right here for a second. Do you think folks are blaming our recession on immigrants, Kathy?
Well, I think that, you know, I would be a liar to not admit that part of what you know, concerns are numbers. And immigration is 50% of the increase in population in the United States. It's probably more of the increase in population in California. And so, you know, I would be a liar to tell you that people aren't concerned about the numbers and the increase in services and our dwindling tax base. We lost over 700,000 jobs in California last year. A lot of that's due to losses in different industries.
Are these jobs immigrants would take? Aerospace industry?
Immigrants, sure, legal immigrants. We accept immigrants from all different countries, and they have all different education levels. So, yes, some of them could have been in that industry. But you're right, some of them might not have been, but regardless, we've lost jobs, we have a dwindling tax base, and we have increased people that are utilizing services. Now, those are both immigrants and citizens and legal residents. I mean, it's everyone that is using services.
Okay. Arturo, would you like to comment?
Yes, it's kind of interesting. A little while ago, Kathy said the problem was undocumented immigrants. Now she's saying part of the problem is illegal immigrants, as well as citizens. The reality is the number of workers that come in, or of course, to answer your question, there's got to be, of course, limitations on everything. No one's going to say that the door's open for everyone to come in. In fact, the reality is to immigrate into the United States is a very difficult task. You have to prove you are not likely to be a public charge. You can't be a person with a bad moral character. There's a list of exclusions that most U.S. citizens would never be able to meet. But to say that just because people are coming in, that they are then taking jobs of other individuals when there's a recession is a false statement. The reality is most of the jobs that undocumented people take are jobs that non-immigrants will not take. Immigrants advocates have stated this over and over again, and it's been confirmed by the study done here locally when they discussed this matter with certain employers. They basically said, a lot of farmers basically said there's no way we can keep productivity without some of the undocumented workers. Back in 1986 when IRCA was passed, farmers said the same thing. Many farmers were quoted as saying, if I have to violate the law so that I can have my crops harvested, I will. Now, I'm not saying that we should promote illegal immigration, but what I'm saying is to blame them for the recession, to say that they are taking jobs that nobody else wants is just not anything that's borne out by any facts.
Immigration Reform Control Act, that's IRCA, passed in 1986, gave us, among other things, amnesty and employer sanctions. Let's skip to another topic here. One of the more controversial proposals has been the suggestion by Governor Pete Wilson that we deny citizenship to the U.S.-born children of undocumented immigrants. That's sort of been a mainstay of U.S. policy, at least since the 14th Amendment. If you're born here, you're a citizen. I'd like to get each of you to react to this proposal. Does it have some merit? Would like to start? Elena?
When you start altering the Constitution, which is the framework of a nation, I think you're making it suited to some interests. And this is the highest point of my sensitivity on this new Wilson campaign, or the governor's campaign against the immigrants. It's a very, very simple fact. You're changing a constitution that has been there, although they're saying that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution was there to grant citizenship to children of slaves at that time when it was added to our Constitution. This day and age, when we're talking about restructuring societies and breaking down the walls, you have a governor that says, see that part of the Constitution? Let's change it because this is what's happening. Do you see a logic in that, or do you see a hidden agenda in something like this? Is there something that's not right about it? People, let me ask you, let me throw back the question to the audience. When you start altering the Constitution, I think we have a serious problem.
So the audience will have some chance for questions. Don.
You know, the founders of this country envisioned the Constitution not as a rigid document, but that one that is changing. Certainly, the governor's proposal with respect to the costs of educating illegal immigrants is a political hot potato. You know, part of the reason that I came here tonight was in the hope that we could put a more rational cast to this debate, and that's what it is. This is a political discussion. It's a debate. It's a part of democracy. So to simply suggest that because it's in the Constitution, it's carved in stone, that isn't fact. You know, there are some facts that we're looking at. The first fact that we're looking at is 4,500 people a day are crossing the border from Mexico into California. That's pretty much accepted to be a fact. During the past 4 years, enough people to fill a city the size of Oakland have crossed the border into California illegally. Those are facts. And we live in an era of limits. And I think Kathy's point was well taken. I mean, it's not a matter of scare tactics to say, can we continue to assimilate people at a rate of 4,500 a day into this state and be able to maintain the social service network? That's a question that's worth debating.
Okay. Arturo, have any merit?
There's a couple of things that we need to address first. First of all, the numbers that are coming in, no one agrees on what the numbers are. Governor Wilson, I believe, quoted twice as many people are coming in than INS said were coming in. So how many are coming in is unsure. But to tamper with the Constitution, especially with the Equal Protection Clause, I mean, that is so central to a democracy that once you begin to make exclusions and allow certain groups of people not to be given whatever rights are given to them under the Constitution, then the question is, what's the next group? Senior citizens, for example, do not put in to the system more than they take out. I mean, they're such a great drain, but because we're a humanitarian society, we say we will support those people. But imagine if a group of people came together and said, they are costing us money. Let's carve out an exception from the Equal Protection Clause and deny them the rights. The last time, well, not the last time, but one of the more famous times when the U.S. government did this was in slavery. We had a civil war. The 14th Amendment was passed to reject any system that was based on a quantification of how much blood you had to decide whether or not you were a U.S. citizen. If you had one drop of African descent, you were denied citizenship. To deny children who had no control over whether they're going to be in this country or not, whether they will be citizens, is so fundamentally un-American that it's amazing. The few countries that do what Wilson is proposing are Japan and Germany, I believe. People who come out with these kind of recommendations, I don't think really understand what America is all about.
Okay, thanks, Arturo. Kathy, we want to go to the audience right now, but why don't you just comment?
I think that it's important to say that it's not just Wilson that's made the proposal in regards to the question of citizenship by birth. Tony Bielenson, a congressman who's a Democrat, has also made that statement. So it's a bipartisan issue. It's not just Republicans against Democrats, and immigration is a bipartisan issue. But one thing I want to say is the United States is one of the very few countries in the world that by merely being on the soil, you become a United States citizen. What we're saying is that people who come into the United States illegally should not be able to have a citizen child. That citizen child is eligible for all benefits. In LA County, they make up 10.3% of LA County's school children, which is $662 million a year is what it's costing the LA County School District. Most countries in the world are not nearly as generous as the United States. One thing, the interesting little side note, often these children, when they hit majority, then are able, their parents who have been living with them illegally in the country, these children then end up bringing them in, because they become citizens of the United States at 18, end up bringing them in in the family reunification. And that's a whole nother issue.
Okay, we're going to throw this open to the audience. There's a mic somewhere. Who has a question? Okay. Why don't you give your name and ask your question?
My name is Janet Rivera, and I reside in Stockton. When you, Don, talked about immigrants coming from the South, are there any stats on immigrants coming from the North?
I'm not aware of any, but you know, it's interesting. One of the comments that I made in the newspaper was, you know, we seem to have no problem enforcing our water boundaries when it comes to Cubans, you know, coming over in boats, and Haitians coming over in boats, or Chinese coming over in boats. If I remember correctly, in the newspaper just within the last month or two, a whole boatload of people from China who came over illegally were turned back. But for some reason, when we start talking about our landed borders, everybody goes into a panic. And I guess I don't understand that. So I can't give you any specific figures. I really don't know. But all I'm saying is it seems to me that we ought to treat all of our borders, whether by water or by land, the same way.
Anyone have the answer to the question?
Yeah, if I may. The reason we don't have figures on that is because the Border Patrol only targets Latino-looking individuals. There are people that do come across the border. There are individuals that do come across the border from Canada illegally. In fact, not all undocumented persons come by land. A lot of individuals from Europe, for example, come on a visa, overstay the visa, and become undocumented. There are unlawful Irish folks, people from England, a lot of English-speaking countries where the people are primarily Anglo and fit in easily into the country here. That is why it's easier for the Border Patrol to try to target people who are primarily Latin. And it's sort of troubling because oftentimes anti-immigrant groups say, well, this is not a race issue. Yet all the images they create are always of brown people coming across or Asian people coming across. And that's very disturbing for me.
Well, Arturo, would you dispute the assumption that most illegal immigration to California comes from Mexico and Latin America?
Probably most of it does come from Latin America, but not all of it, and not all of it by illegal crossings.
Kathy, you have some...
I have a statistic from the INS in this regards, and 95% of all illegal aliens, and this is only apprehensions, so I mean those are the people that are coming over the border, occur just along a 200-mile southern border. We do have northern borders in Canada. California, though, isn't impacted by illegal immigration coming from Canada as much as we are from Mexico, because we don't share a border with Canada. We share an international border with Mexico.
Any other questions? Okay, one follow-up.
I want to follow up with that. According to the Los Angeles Times by Assemblyman Polanco, he states that there are more immigrants coming from northern states than the southern border. Now, there are Canadians that are coming across those borders that work into Washington, and I'm sure that they're not picking apples.
I'm a little confused on whether you're talking about more legal, illegal. I mean, you're talking all immigrants, visitors, visas, and everything?
Yes.
That might be correct, but I mean, that's visitors, visas, that's all immigration. The largest, many of you probably read some of the major magazines, U.S. News and World Report just released in 1980s, 2.2 million Mexicans came into the United States legally as residents. That was the highest of any nationality admitted to the United States. That's the only figure I can give you in that regards, but it is the highest.
Let's get to another question here. Anybody? Come on up. Give me your name and question.
Yo soy Reverendo Rodríguez y hablo aquí el español para nuestros mexicanos. I run a homeless shelter in the Lodi area, and I have helped many Spanish people in the past, and I'm always Selena right here 100% that she says if we want to do something to help, we have to get down to the core. I believe the whole nation is in trouble. And what we're doing and I've been reading and studying on this issue is that Seems like Wilson or the White House wants to take money from the poor, that's the poorest, when there's more in this United States that you can take away. I see a real unjust area in the whole thing, very unjust because I'm going to get to the question right now. Can we work in other issues that we can take some money off of some other people to correct this problem and put a stop to this?
I'm not quite...
You're looking for someplace else to cut. There's an old Washington axiom that goes, don't cut you, don't cut me, cut the one behind the tree. And basically what they're saying is you know, nobody wants to be the recipient of cutbacks of any sort. You know, the president recently enacted one of the largest tax increases on the rich in recent history. If you believe all of the things that we've been told, the rich got whacked. Right. And what you're saying is, to me, don't cut the poor. Tough questions. They really are tough questions. But, I mean, let's face it, when you get right down to it, nobody wants to see their entitlement cut. And as I started out by saying, we live in an era of limits.
Okay, another question. I think we got one here at the mic.
Thank you. My name's Ted Gonzalez. I'm a city councilman here in Stockton. And before that, I was a community outreach worker with a nonprofit organization. I did over 500 meetings in 19 counties in California. And my question is going to be directed at Ms. Turner. What I found out in the 2 years that I worked for this corporation was that there are many women who are working in the fields. Women with missing hands, limbs, eyes. Women who are working out there for $2 an hour. What I'd like to know is that who's benefiting off of these slave wages?
I guess we're talking about how much of the workforce is comprised of undocumented immigrants.
Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm going to answer your question in a couple parts, because there's something that Arturo said earlier that you've now given me the opening to reply to. And that is illegal immigration. We have employer sanctions in this country. And it is illegal to work in this country without proper documentation. And I think that there's been 2 other times in history where people have said that the United States can't survive without illegal immigrants working in the fields and such, in inhumane working conditions, in violation of labor codes, you name it, everything you talked about. And what they're saying is that it's okay to treat people that way, that the United States can't live without treating people that way. And I think that it's important to recognize that if we do a better job of utilizing employer sanctions, if we do a better job in enforcement of labor code and cooperating with the INS, let's go after these employers that are violating those wage and labor laws.
Kathy, that's a good question. Let me interrupt just a second. If the magnet is jobs, and we do have employer sanctions, why not increased enforcement of employer sanctions as opposed to cutting off benefits, health, education, welfare?
I think the magnet's multiple, first of all. I don't think jobs is the only magnet by itself. But let's use jobs. I'm all for increasing employer sanctions. Go after the employer. If the employer is violating the law by hiring those people, not withholding taxes, let's go after him.
Why doesn't that happen?
INS had troubles for years. There are more people in Washington, D.C., state police surrounding the capital of the United States than there are Border Patrol in the whole United States. Gives you an idea of how many people there are to enforce employer sanctions. We need to we need to enforce employer sanctions, and that needs to be a priority of the INS. And I'm all for it.
Arturo, you have some comments?
Yeah, the problem with employer sanctions, the GAO just came out a couple years ago, came out with a report, and they said that 1 out of every 5 employers were discriminating against Latinos and Asians directly because of employer sanctions. Department of Fair Employment and Housing in California also indicated that there was an increase in discrimination in jobs against Latinos and Asians because of employer sanctions. If people really... Jobs are clearly the reason people are here. The studies indicated, everyone who has anything to do with the real world knows that. To say that people come here for other reasons is absolutely ridiculous. If Governor Wilson and other people are serious, if we assume for a minute that there is a problem and we need to stop unlawful immigration, then what we need to do is not punish the employer, because they've already said we'll violate the law, we don't care. What we need to do, and what I would recommend Wilson do, is that he actually enforce the labor codes, the labor laws, the wage and hour laws, the field sanitation laws, increase the minimum wage to a workable, to a livable wage. That would take the incentive away, and enforce those laws aggressively. That would take the incentive away from employers to hire undocumented persons. But he hasn't done that. He has yet to even address that issue. Instead, he's dealing with side issues that have nothing to do with why people are here in this country. And a lot of this discussion is, again, people are assuming that immigrants, legal or undocumented, are a burden to the state or to the country. 26 studies that I am familiar with, out of those studies that talk about this issue, 24 of them say they are a benefit and not a burden. There are only 2 studies that say they are a burden to this country. And those 2 studies are the only 2 studies FAIR would like people to think exist, and in fact there are more.
I want to give Don a chance here. Don, you want to comment? Why no employer sanctions?
Well, I wasn't going to speak to the question of employer sanctions as much as I was going to, again, point out that there is bipartisan consensus on this issue. This is not a Republican versus Democrat, or the rest of the legislature versus the governor.
It's a human issue.
It certainly is a human issue, and very frankly, Councilmember Gonzalez, I don't support people who have, I don't support people having to deal with substandard health facilities out in the field, and I don't support employers who take advantage of their workers. And I think that you're absolutely right. We should do more to enforce employer sanctions, because it's the fair thing to do.
We have another question here from the audience.
Thank you. Is this thing on? Kathy, you said your dad was the commissioner of INS, right? I used to work along the U.S.-Mexico border, so I'm keenly aware of the people that are coming across the border. And it's true that there's a lot of Mexicans coming across the border, but did you know, I don't know if your dad told you this or not, but it's very easy from any country to get a visa to get into Mexico and then hire somebody to cross that border illegally. So, you know, it's really not the Mexican problem we're talking about. It's the problem of all these other individuals that are coming into this country. See? Those individuals that are making a profit out of it. Now, another point that you brought up that you're really concerned about, that your big problem is with the enforcement of the federal laws. That's where your key is. Not blaming these immigrants that come over here. They want to come over here and make $1 and get the heck back to their country. I'm referring to the Mexican over there.
Okay.
One other point that the reason I'm aware of that is that because I've arrested Germans, I've arrested Chinese, I've arrested all kinds of individuals that had documents that weren't good enough, but yet they got somebody to cross them over this border and they became charges. Did you also know that it's very easy to come to the United States? Once you're in the United States and you get arrested by the INS, you can post bail, and then you can remain in this country while you're under appeal on that.
You worked for the Border Patrol?
No. U.S. Customs.
Okay. Kathy?
U.S. Customs and Border Patrol are always on a turf battle. But I'm very, thank you for your comments. I'm very aware of all of them. Fair and I, what I'm saying when I'm talking about illegal immigration, I don't care where it's coming from. It's against the law. It doesn't matter if they're coming in via plane from England, if they're coming over the Canadian border, if it doesn't matter where they're coming from. It's against the federal law, and I'm very aware. One thing you might want to know is Assemblywoman Bornstein, who's a Democrat, is sponsoring a bill that would make it against state law to smuggle people into the country or smuggle people who are here unlawfully.
Ricardo, I just wanted to add that Survival Techniques is an equal opportunity employer. That's what everybody's doing. So let's not focus on the Latinos or the ones that come through by land just because it's connected to the state of California or Texas.
Okay, thank you. Question?
My name is Dan Ramirez. This is my hometown. I'm visiting. I'm from the Bay Area. Just a comment about Mr. Parsons trying to drag Democrats into this villain story as well. I would say what a Shakespearean character said to both parties: a pox on both your houses for building expedient political careers on the backs of the vulnerable and those who can't speak for themselves. My question is this, and it's basically to Ms. Turner and Mr. Parsons. Does the following passage from Moses have any bearing on the way we implement and decide policy? Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. If Governor Wilson and Senators Boxer and Feinstein had been manning the Egyptian border when Mary, Joseph, and Jesus had to flee from the death squads of Herod, and they didn't have their papers in order, my question is, would they have been turned back? In other words, in implementing policy, shouldn't we have more of a concern for the gut-level humanitarian Good Samaritan ethic that should guide us as citizens of the planet and not just as born and bred Native Americans or Americans, of which I am one? Or should it always be this cerebral Pharisees' exercise of the legality of the law and crossing the T's and dotting the I's? Aren't there more fundamental human concerns at stake here? And as a side note, I'm a lay teacher in a Latino Pentecostal church in the Bay Area, and a good percentage of the congregation, unfortunately I can't tell you which it is because you'll probably send some green vans after them, are my brothers and sisters in Christ, and this is a fundamental moral concern, and if we have to obey God rather than man, we're going to do it in this instance.
Should we, is there some room for humanity and federal immigration law, I guess?
Okay, basically morality. I think this is a good time to talk about the church and morality. It's a very difficult. Human rights are human rights of the world. And I think that the United States cannot continue to be the 911 for the world. We need to take care of those who are here legally and need to assist other countries in improving their human rights. And I think it's also important to note that we're quite a few centuries past Mother Mary, and we are a country of many different religions. And I think it's important to note that we are a country of different religions and keep that in context. I think the church, the Catholic Church, has assisted illegal immigrants in many circumstances, and I think that they're violating federal law, and we need to come down to that basic premise that is against federal law. You need to then open the borders and be an open border advocate. You can't have a social welfare net and unlimited immigration. We have limited resources. It's a hard question to answer because you're talking in an abstract.
Arturo.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the old question of Huckleberry Finn, whether it is wrong to break the law by protecting an individual's freedom. And, America's a country of Frederick Douglass's and Benjamin Franklin's individuals who broke the law to escape slavery and to escape apprenticeship, to seek lives of their own. I think it's a cop-out to say that just because it's against the law, therefore we should cut their benefits. I mean, there's got to be some logic, something in between the fact that it's against the law and the fact that they're here. Why do we then say if the person is dying, we cannot provide a medical assistance? I mean, I am as of yet to hear anything from the fellows here that undocumented aliens are somehow a burden to this country, that somehow they're causing the problems, that somehow they caused the recession. There hasn't been any nexus, any connection between the two yet. Just to simply say that something is unlawful, therefore we should deny them schooling if they happen to show up. It's amazing because this issue has been brought out by a lot of anti-immigrant groups. So we respond and say, okay, let's discuss the substantive issues. Is this really a problem? If it is really a problem, then let's find ways to resolve it. But now that we're here and we want to discuss it, they don't want to discuss the details. They just want to say, hey, it's against the law, it shouldn't be that way, therefore we can do anything we want. Well,
You seem eager to answer this question, Kathy.
Arturo keeps on talking about all the studies that state that illegal immigration benefits the economy, or he'll probably make it more general immigration. Well, like I said, 97% of us are immigrants, so where are you going to make the cutoff when you're making the distinctions between immigrants when you're just doing a study on immigration? All recent studies have stated that illegal immigration costs California. The California Auditor General estimated $3 billion annually.
What about the benefits?
146 million. LA County says 500 million, and I noted in your article that it said Urban Institute had some conflicts with that. One thing it's important to note, Urban Institute was involved in the LA County study, that they had their chance, their day in the sun then, and they didn't make any distinctions between immigrant classes in the Urban Institute study.
Another question, or Elena?
Which is very scary if you do not make those kinds of distinctions. I would be happy to provide this audience tonight, if you could leave me your name and your address, a copy of Governor Wilson's letter to President Clinton and all the other supporting documents that come with it. And you will see how Governor Wilson, or governor's writers said one thing and soft pedals it. No, we don't really want it, but this is really what we want. First, they throw you into the rhetoric of what they really want, and the wrong impressions are in it already, and then they take you back. It's a very interesting study. If there's anything that you should read this year, this is the Governor Wilson's letter to President Clinton and the arguments that he has with it, and you'll see how there is really a wrong premise on this whole thing. And I leave it up to you to judge, but I'd like to be able to spread out this copy to those who are here tonight. There's no time for further discussion.
Okay, let's get to another question here.
I have several to make. My name is Olga Salerio, and I'm from Modesto. And thanks God for this country that I can walk freely in every city and every town in this United States. I have a question for this lady. I only heard your name. I'll address you informally, Elena. You think that because Governor Wilson wants to change the 14th Amendment, that nobody should mess around with the Constitution? That's one. If that is the case, how come nobody made a fuss when Tom Hayden was elected to office? The 9th Amendment very clearly says that a person that has tried to overthrow the government can never hold public office. Tom Hayden is sitting in there. And when he's sitting in Sacramento, he was married to Hanoi Jane. Nobody, no Democrat ever made a fuss. I'm going to tell you something. I am a Democrat, a registered Democrat. I do not believe in illegal immigration. I don't care what color of shape. There was an incident at Johansson High School in Modesto yesterday where 3 Hispanic youth were arrested for, they claim, for hitting a guard. The parents told a reporter, we already have $1,200 to get a coyote to get them across the border. Wouldn't those parents have been better off saving those $1,200 to get their children in this country legally? The coyote might pack those 3 kids in a van with 30 people, and they might end up dead in here, and the people is not going to have money to bury them.
Okay.
Dianne Feinstein has just introduced a bill in Congress a week ago that will do more harm to the farm worker than Pete Wilson will ever do. And I'm going to tell you why. Right now, every farm worker in California or in the United States is covered under federal law. That if they get hurt on the job, they don't only have the recourses of workman compensation, they can sue the employer in federal law. Dianne Feinstein has just introduced a bill that will take those rights out of the farm worker, and I don't think it's right, and I'm going to tell you why, because they do get low wages.
Okay.
A worker that makes $225 gross in worker compensation that loses 2 legs and 1 arm in a tractor accident, how much do you think he's going to get in workman comp? $100 a week or $115? Do you think he's going to be able to support 5 people? Do you think he's going to support 5 people?
All right.
They need the protection of that.
Let's get to the answer here. Okay, Lena, you want to respond to that?
Can you answer me that? I want to know if they can answer that.
That's a mind-boggling series of information that you gave me, ma'am, and thank you very much. Yes. I did not put Tom Hayden into office. I believe I was not here yet in the United States when he got into office. But we do have an unfinished business with what we now call President Clinton about his anti-war sentiments. And we just kind of put that in the closet, didn't we? So even that we should revive more than we should revive the story of Mr. Tom Hayden being married to Hanoi Jane and all that thing. It's over. It's water under the bridge now. But your issue, ma'am, about the 14th Amendment, when I spoke about it and I brought it up here, I was just appealing to the sensitivity of this crowd tonight. Again, as Mr. Parson had said, does that mean that we are making a wrong move if we add an amendment to an amendment that's already there? It is what I was leading to is you have a constitution that safeguards many of the basic rights of the American people. And then you have, at this day and age, someone who is belly aching about the economy of his state and goes ahead, and let me include all the other bipartisan people that have said things about the Constitution too. So he makes a policy about curtailing or curbing the influx of all these illegal immigrants, and in so doing, he hits on the highest note and saying, let's change the Constitution and let's fit it to what's going to be good for California or for the United States. Wrong. That's why we have this forum. That's why we need discussion, rational discussion, and see the nuances of all this discussion. If we hit the 14th Amendment now, like Ricardo said, what about the other amendments? Shall we change it in the future to fit the political agenda of the different people who have the power to speak and be heard in this country? That alone is my point of argument.
Okay.
I think there's something basically wrong with the touch-up work that needs to be, that he wants to do.
Let's have another question.
Yes, thank you. Governor Wilson recently sent a couple of his top state officials to Stockton to talk with the Stockton Records editorial board about his newly discovered immigration problem. And one of them, the deputy director of the Department of Corrections, was quoted the next day in the papers saying that illegal immigrants are either taking your jobs, preying on you in your homes and streets, or dependent on welfare. I'd like Mr. Ocampo to, I believe you've already commented on the job issue, but would you care to comment on the, I know you've done some work on these very suspicious statistics that they're throwing out with regard to crime and the notion that somehow undocumented people can receive welfare. Could you enlighten us on that?
Certainly. Undocumented people are not entitled to welfare. In fact, even Governor Wilson admits that. If one were to look at the budget he prepared for 93-94, on page 28 there's a chart. And the chart under undocumented worker, it states 0 received by undocumented persons from AFDC, 0 received for SSI, SSP. There was a study done in San Francisco, for example, where women, they found that 23% of the undocumented women in San Francisco were eligible for AFDC for their children because the child was a U.S. citizen. What they found out is of that 23%, only 5% access the AFDC. And that correlates with all the other studies that indicate that undocumented workers, one, are not eligible for benefits, and when they're eligible for their child, they tend not to use it for various reasons, the primary reason being that they're afraid that they're going to be reported to the INS. But very quickly on the prison question, that's one of the myths that's very important for us to dispel. Wilson put out a number on how many, on what he believed to be the number of undocumented persons in the state prison system. What he really did was cited the number of persons that have INS holds. We spoke with the California Department of Corrections, with the Office of Assembly Research, and even locally with DVI, and all of them have told us that an INS hold is a hold that is put on a person that could be an unlawful alien or a legal alien who could be deportable because he was convicted of a certain crime. It could even include individuals that are here on a business or tourist visa. It even include people that don't even live here, people that were conducting some unlawful activity, happened to be in the state and got caught. The reality is, according to all of these departments, is that when I asked them then of that, they told us 10.7%. Of that 10.7% who have INS holds, how many of those are undocumented? All three of them have told us that they don't know. No one keeps track of that. It could be 0. It could be 10.7%. The reality is nobody knows. Wilson should know that because he's been sophisticated enough in these matters to know that, in fact, an INS hold does not automatically mean that that represents the undocumented population.
We're running out of time. It's almost 7 o'clock. I'm not going to cut anybody off, I don't think, but I need to...
Ricardo.
We're going to keep on going. I just need to remind you time is at a premium, and I need to give folks some time for closing remarks. Don, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to address Arturo's numbers on AFDC. Children of illegal and newly legalized immigrants represent the fastest growing segment of California's AFDC caseload, almost 12% of all AFDC recipients. The number of children receiving welfare whose parents are illegally residing in this state has increased fourfold since 1988. In 1988, the number of recipients was 38,800, which represented about $45 million in state costs. It's estimated in the 1993-1994 fiscal year, the number of recipients will be 176,750 at a cost to the state of $236 million.
If I can respond real quickly, Ricardo.
Sure.
We contacted the Office of Assembly Research, and we contacted Dean Andel's office and Governor Wilson because they all made these claims. We asked them where was the documentation for this, and again, they were not able to produce it because they do not know. No one counts how many of the children that are born here have undocumented parents. They are guessing, it's speculation. That's part of the entire problem here. There's information that's being put out that cannot be substantiated.
There's a study in San Diego that spoke of a methodology. Do you know what that methodology is?
That particular one, I believe what they did is they looked at how many persons were receiving aid for the child but not for the parent, and assumed that all of those people were undocumented, which is not the case. People that are familiar with AFDC realize that there are different reasons why a parent may not be eligible for AFDC or may not be receiving it when the child is. So that was a fairly ludicrous assumption, and that is one of the few studies that's actually been criticized by most demographers and economists because of the inflated number.
Don, very quickly, and then we'll get to another question.
Same document that I had from the Office of Planning and Research. November 1992 report on immigration. LA County reports that as of January 1st, 1992, there were 250,000 citizen children of undocumented parents living in that county alone.
Okay. Question. Mr. Lopez.
My name is Richard Lopez. I'm a retired general contractor, have engineer's license. But I'm also involved in the labor movement in a way because we have some dormitories for these people that don't have a place to go, and we facilitate that dormitories. Now, we have a big problem on hand because some of the contractors are paying them $2 an hour, like it was stated by Councilman Gonzalez. And they come over and complain to me, and I try to take them to the labor commissioner, but they don't go. They don't want to go to the labor commissioner. They're afraid they're going to be deported. So coming back to this statements or resolution that the governor introduced in Congress about the little child when he's born that they want to take the citizenship away from him, and the governor must be wet, really, because the Treaty of Guadalupe give you a right to become a citizen while you were born. They're going to have to do away with the Treaty of Guadalupe before they can do that, and I don't think they're going to do it, because I don't think we're going to go for it. Are we going to go for that or not? What?
Anyone want to answer that?
No. Okay. And we have another big problem. I have a sister that is dying in San Antonio, Texas, and about a month ago I went over there to San Antonio, and then I slipped away and I went to Eagle Pass, Carrizo Springs, Asherton, Cotulla, and some of those cities. They have these undocumented workers in tents with no facilities, no water, no running water or nothing, and they pay them $1.50 an hour.
Your question.
Right along the border, $1.50 an hour. Not $1.50 an hour. That's what they pay. So I mean, what are we going to do with that problem of the resolution about jerking away the citizenship from a child that was born in the United States? What are we going to do there? I remember not too long ago, the Immigration Patrol was drowning some of these people between 1980 and 95. They drowned 13. The community got together and named me as a Sherman, and the community, and so they gave me some money to go to Washington to talk to the congressmen. I went to Washington and I spoke to 11 Mexican-American congressmen, including Mr. Nelson. He was the head of the Immigration Patrol. But nothing did about it. I also spoke to Wilson. Wilson was there as a senator. He was the only one that didn't listen to me. All the rest of them listened to me, and we went as a caucus. We invited Mr. Nelson to come over and talk to us, which he did. And my golly, it worked, because they stopped drowning those people. Here in California was drowning the people. In San Antonio, I spoke to the mayor there, Cisneros, and he says, Richard, right here they're shooting him on the back. They make him run, and they shoot him on the legs. And I says, what has to be done? They had penalized a couple of immigration officers.
We need to wrap it up here.
They penalized 2 of them. They gave them a 1.5 year sentence, just like a ticket. So I'd say that we're not going to let Governor Wilson get by with that. Thank you very much.
Any comments?
I have a comment regarding the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol, out of all enforcement agencies, has one of the lowest human rights violation records per incident, and I think that you need to keep that in context.
If I could respond to that, anyone who knows anything about the Border Patrol knows that is probably one of the more ridiculous statements. One of the reasons the Border Patrol doesn't have that many, for a while they didn't have that many complaints filed because people were afraid to file complaints. People are now being encouraged to file complaints, and what we've seen is a rise in complaints against the Border Patrol because they are being encouraged to do so. There is a report from the American Friends Service Committee in Sacramento that documents the hundreds of cases of physical abuse by Border Patrol officers, rapes of women by Border Patrol officers, shooting of people in the back by Border Patrol officers. Here in this county, there have been several incidences where Border Patrol officers have beat people while they were handcuffed. There has been a congressional committee report which has criticized severely the supervision and training of Border Patrol officers, saying that it's been very inadequate, and also stating that when there are complaints filed, action taken on that is, as they said, very spotty. There's a very serious concern about the Border Patrol, and one of the things that hopefully will come out of this is a civilian review committee which will overview the abuses by Border Patrol.
Kathy?
Ricardo, I'd like to add to what Arturo had just said. He's referring to the Immigration Enforcement Review Commission Act that came out through Representative Javier Becerra of California. There's a proposed law that would police the INS. In fact, you are encouraged to send cases and concerns on immigration law enforcement to no less than Attorney General Janet Reno, and the address is made available through the Department of Justice. There is reporting, and it's encouraged.
Okay, Kathy.
I've been down to the border many times and viewed the people coming across the border, and I can guarantee you one thing. If they have to choose between the Federales and the Border Patrol, they gladly go to the Border Patrol. And I think...
Would that excuse any misbehavior?
No behavior should be excused, and it is inexcusable. But I think that you have individuals that have their conclusion before they create their data.
Okay, let's try to keep the questions brief. We've got a lot of people who want to ask questions, and we still need to give closing remarks. Luisa.
Hi, my name is Luisa Beretta, and I'm president of Hispanics for Political Action. I'd like to direct my questions to Kathy and to Don Parsons. Okay, you mentioned that illegal immigrants are automatically committing a crime when they cross the border. These immigrants are in violation of federal civil law, yet you make it sound as it's a criminal violation like killing or stealing. Can you tell me the difference between a violation of a federal law and a criminal law? And why are you misleading the public?
Kathy?
I don't think...
Let's hold the applause till after.
I don't think I am misleading the public. I think that I was very clear that it is a violation of federal law, and that's what I have said. I did not make the distinction between criminal or civil, but often it can be a criminal to re-enter the United States illegally after you've entered once. It can be considered a felony, but criminal activity, civil sanctions, it's still against the federal law. And I think it's important that state, county, local, and federal officials do the utmost to uphold our laws. It's the law of our country, whether it's a civil law or a criminal law. There are differences, but breaking the law is a law.
Don, you want to respond?
With respect to the distinction between civil and criminal law, and I don't know if perhaps, some of the comments that you made were drawn from comments that have been made in the paper by other people. I don't think that I ever indicated that there were anything other than civil sanctions involved. I don't believe that I ever said anything about criminal violations of the law. But, on a more philosophical base, how do we draw distinctions between which laws can be broken and which laws cannot? How do you argue between, we were talking earlier, is white-collar crime worse than blue-collar crime? These are laws, they're on the books for a reason. And it seems to me that to draw any kind of differing distinctions between civil laws and criminal laws, then you start splitting off the distinctions between different types of criminal behavior.
If I can make a quick correction.
Sure.
If you leave the country and come back, it is not automatically a felony. You have to be formally deported. If you return within 5 years of a formal deportation, then yes, it is a felony. Most people actually are not deported. They sign voluntary departure. But there is one important reason to make a distinction between civil and criminal law. Law enforcement officers sometimes improperly deny and arrest people because they are undocumented workers. A police officer does not have the right to arrest you if you are in violation of the civil law. If you're in violation of a criminal law, then he has the right to arrest you. And a lot of times there are law enforcement officers, police, that don't realize this, and they violate the law by arresting someone merely because they're in violation of a civil law that says it is unlawful for them to be present in the country.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other question?
Yes, I have a question for Don. You're a business graduate. The assertion has been made by, I think, both you and Kathy that it's not a race issue, and you state that immigration is costing the economy in California a great deal of money, and there's a recession and unemployment. But isn't it true that recessions are a normal part of capitalism, that over X periods of time, companies decrease production and then later increase it with a reduced workforce to increase profits, At least that's what Adam Smith says in The Wealth of Nations. Could you respond to that and the question of how that might be scapegoating?
I think if I remember the dialogue that's gone on this evening, I think the assertion that illegal immigration is being used as a scapegoat for the recession was made on the left side of the table, not on the right side of the table. So perhaps that question is better directed to the folks sitting next to me.
Well, actually,
I think
Kathy did say
question,
$700,000.
let me finish
Okay,
let me finish my response. Thank you. I think what I have said is that we live in an era of limits, and it seems curious to me that so many of the people who come up and argue against the United States being the world policeman turn around and want it to be the world's nursemaid. And there are limitations to what we can do. The question is, how do we deal with the implications of these decisions? What kind of standards are we going to apply in determining who can and who cannot come into this country? And can we afford to assimilate people at the rate that we're currently doing it?
I guess another part of that question was, and I guess we've asked it before, are immigrants to blame for the recession?
No. I don't think anyone can, I don't think anybody on my side of the table has said that.
Okay.
No, actually,
okay.
Kathy did say that 700,000 jobs were lost
I did
last
say yes,
year.
but I added all sorts of different people, all different classes.
Okay. Another question.
Okay, my name is Tomas Morales, and I'm here to ask. I mean, all of a sudden, I don't know, you guys decided that immigration is a problem for, all of a sudden, Pete Wilson comes from the South, where immigration is a problem, and not just immigration, but welfare. For 5 generations of welfare are in East LA, down in the South, or in San Francisco. We over here are kind of a rural area, and the immigrants over here are illegal or legal, they're doing their job, and everybody's benefiting from it, from the store owner to you guys in Sacramento. Now, why all of a sudden Pete Wilson doesn't look at his own backyard and modify welfare reform, and leave us alone? He should look at his backyard. That's what's happening, And I know you're here for Pete Wilson, and I just want to know how all of a sudden he came to that conclusion that illegal immigrant is spending a lot of money, are an expense to the United States or to California, and all of a sudden he came with that conclusion, and he doesn't take a look at the system, INS system, white collar system, white lily system. They're the ones that are responsible, for running the system. The White House ain't called the Brown House, it's called the White House, and the system is the one that created this problem in the first place.
Okay.
And the thing is, wait a minute, and the thing is, the thing is that you let this problem grow and grow and grow, and all of a sudden, well, illegal immigration is a problem, or legal citizens is a problem, You should take a look at what you have created your own self, We try to be part of you, but you have been rejecting us. We still want to be part of you, and you take us like if we don't know what's happening. I'm not here to get an education in immigration or border patrol tactics. I live with illegal immigrants, I ate with illegal immigrants. I ran with illegal immigrants. I know what's happening. But all of a sudden, you people over there with Pete Wilson and his pippity-pow buddies, Simas, and the other one, Endo, decide to come and bother us here in Stockton with your political...
Ricardo. Is this a new debate on immigration? Why now? Why now?
Well, it's in the first place, let me correct something.
Mr. Morales.
Is that your name?
Yeah.
Mr. Morales, let me correct something first.
Good.
I live in Stockton, too. I'm not from Sacramento. 85% of the people that were surveyed in a recent LA Times poll considered illegal immigration a problem. 77% of the people who were surveyed in the same poll were against illegal immigration. So it's not just me, it's a whole lot of other people that are in the same boat. Pete Wilson didn't just invent this issue out of the sky. there are an awful lot of other people who are concerned besides the governor. And very frankly, I have found that politicians tend to react to public sentiment more than create political opportunity. I don't think that this proposal would have come forward if there wasn't a perception in the state that this was a problem.
If I make a comment, Ricardo.
Oh, hold on just a second.
Oh, sorry.
In fairness, Governor Wilson did make a series of proposals, but Senators Feinstein and Boxer also made some proposals, one on using the National Guard to patrol the border, the other charging $1 fee.
I'm aware of this. I'm aware of this, of the proposals and that, like the lady said. You can introduce 10,000 bills, but that doesn't mean they're going to get passed. You know what I mean? Because I know how I know how the legislature works in Sacramento, Assembly and Senate, you know, way in different committees. But the thing is that I think, I'm talking to the Hispanic community here in Stockton, I think we don't need these people. I think we can introduce our own bill, backed up by Senator Johnson. We think we can write language into it and put it in the Senate or whatever. I don't think we can introduce our own bill. We get together. Thank you.
Can I address the legislation a little bit?
Well, I think Arturo was up first, and then we'll get to Kathy, and then Elena.
Yeah, there's, I mean, that's part of the problem. I mean, because there's a perception that there's a problem, you know, this is one thing that I forgot to mention in terms of benefit. When there's a lot of undocumented workers coming in and there's a recession, one benefit is politicians will always jump on the bandwagon and blame everything on the immigrant. So suppose that's a benefit to Wilson. And no one on the left side of the table, and why we're on the left side, I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but no one on the left side of the table said anything about this being a Democrat-Republican issue. I am just as willing and happy to criticize Boxer and Feinstein for their anti-immigrant statements as well. The reality is, and Don touched on it, is if sentiment goes a certain way, whether it's right or wrong, politicians will take advantage of that, and to become more popular in the polls will agree with the popular sentiment is, whether they're right or wrong. Now the reality is, and that's the whole point of what I would like to bring the discussion to, is it really a problem, or is there a false perception out there? All of the studies indicate, everyone that's worked with immigrants tends to know that the problem is not as big as they're making it out to be. And all they're going to do is aggravate the situation and make it worse. One example is a DMV bill that FAIR has been sponsoring and has gone through. Here is something that DMV says is going to cost $1 million to implement. What's it going to do? Is it going to stop immigration? I don't think so. But we're putting out money for a problem that may not be very large.
Okay, Kathy.
I wanted to touch briefly on some of the legislation that passed, because Mr. Morales, you stated that you want to introduce legislation. Well, what happened in Sacramento, we call the California miracle, and that's from FAIR. You probably would call the California nightmare. But what happened was 4 immigration bills passed the state legislature on a bipartisan basis, with the maximum no votes being 14 out of 80 so persons, and that was in the assembly. And Luis Caldera, a freshman assemblyman, was the floor jockey who supported the DMV bill on the assembly floor. It has bipartisan support. The vast majority of Californians think illegal immigration is a problem, and the state legislature is acting on it, and you're seeing the bipartisan work going on in the legislature.
Okay, I know you're right on that, but I'm here to tell the people it doesn't have to be like that. We can change that by mandating, again, introducing our own bills. I mean, back up by Pat Johnson, whoever's willing to give in support, Gary Menti. That's what I'm saying. Some people are not aware of, you can introduce your own bill and make your own bills. And that's what I'm here tonight for, to make them aware. It doesn't have to, like they introduce bill, we can introduce other bills, you know, and that's the way it can be.
That's the beauty of democracy.
Thank you, Ms. Morales.
Thank you.
Elena.
Mr. Morales, in reference to history, I think every immigrant group has been hit by the issue of immigration and being posed the question, what the heck are you doing here in the United States of America when you should be doing all that work? German, Polish, Chinese and Japanese people have been hit at one time. This is another one of those waves, and that's why it's very important for us to come out and speak out, because this is our generation, this is the age and the era and the wave of people that's being hit at this point in time.
Okay.
It's historical, and so far it hasn't changed the United States. We still live by the contributions of the immigrants in this country.
You know, just to verify something, just to let you know, my parents were not illegal immigrants. We were not legal. My parents were here before, back in the 18th. Tarahumara Indians and Mexicans, they were here before, and I'm not illegal. I'm fourth, fifth generation probably, you know. But I do support and oppose anything Wilson and his two companions, his two mules have to say about illegal immigration.
Well, keep it brief.
You've seen it. You've seen me. I mean, my name is Janet Rivera, and I'm proud to say that I'm that 3% that you talked about, not the 97%. I have a question to ask you. By 1994, 5.2 million permanent residents in California will be eligible for citizenship. How is the INS program proposed to maximize the process of these new citizens?
Kathy?
You're beyond, citizenship is beyond the scope of FAIR, but I will say, as the daughter of Alan Nelson, the former commissioner, he is very supportive of citizenship programs and is working with an organization called the Kettering Foundation to get citizenship programs into high schools to start preparing some of these children who are going to be eligible to become citizens, to become citizenship. There's a huge problem. Legal immigrants aren't becoming citizens. They're not exercising their eligibility to become American citizens and their rights to vote. So beyond FAIR, I do support that. Like I said, my father is working on a program. That's the most connection I have with it. The INS has got huge problems. INS has got too much on their table as it is. How many of you have been to an INS office? The people who haven't been there, I explain it, it's the DMV times 10 on its worst day that you've been to the DMV. Multiply the line times 10. INS has got huge problems. They need more personnel to process all the paperwork that they've created.
Mr. Ocampo, could you answer that question?
Yeah, we definitely got to get people to apply for citizenship. What some people are recommending, and I think it's a very good idea, is the creation of citizenship centers throughout the state where we know there are a lot of immigrants who are coming up on those 5 years and may be eligible for citizenship. And this is something that maybe in the future may backlash on a lot of politicians when a lot of these people who are recent immigrants and at one point were undocumented, when they are able to vote. And we definitely need to encourage people to do that, to get them into the system and get them more active in democracy and in our political system.
Okay, we need to move on to the next question.
According to Congressman Becerra, it would take, based on the INS's current resources, it would take the INS 87 years to process 5.2 million permanent residents.
We're accepting too many legal immigrants. As I stated earlier in my statement, that would tell you that we either need more INS, and you can take that either way.
Okay, next question.
Good evening. My name is Maria Gomez, and I'm a healthcare provider. And Kathy Turner mentioned that she has gone to the border. I wonder if Kathy had the opportunity to go visit the dumps in Tijuana and see the people living there and the conditions that they're living in. No water, no fuel, no food. Maybe you would understand why men and children and babies are risking their lives to run across the freeway. I see illegal immigrants in some of the practices that I work in, and they come very humbly. They come with the fear that we might turn them in. They come with a willingness to pay. And unfortunately, they end up in the emergency rooms, which is the most costliest of all of our health care available. And they do go when they're very, very ill. They feel almost ashamed because they cannot afford the exorbitant amount of money that's charged in the emergency room.
Okay. Kathy.
I have had the opportunity to see much of what you're talking about, and I understand the plight of the people coming. I stated it before, and it's maybe just a little bit too much of a statement, but the United States cannot be the 911 for the world. We could utilize our resources better by providing money into their own country than providing the money for emergency services here. We could provide, like, let's go into the refugees. There's 17 million refugees in the world. The United States can't accept all of them. But we actually could better spend our money, spending the money in their home countries to improve the countries, the living conditions, etc., in their own home countries than bringing them to the United States. And that way you assist more people in the long run.
Well, let me just close with this. If you don't take care of the border, whatever happens at the border will come over here. And unfortunately, as far as health care, Mexico is already being blamed for the high rate of tuberculosis, for cholera, for hepatitis, etc. And I don't think that's very fair. Thank you.
Ricardo, may I just add to what Kathy has just said? Kathy, I am an immigrant, and let me tell you this one basic fact. Consumption of an immigrant group is twice the consumption of a regular native-born American, because one, we're providing for a family here, and two, many of us are providing for the people at home too. We work twice as harder for us to earn twice as money as we need for our family that is settled here, and also for the people we care for back home. And that is not shown in any of the statistics that are coming out of late. Thank you.
Okay. Don, you had a comment? Okay. Let's keep the questions brief. We really need to move it along.
Hey, my name is John X. Fernandez, and I'd like to start a question first by each one of the panelists, starting with Kathy, and I would like to ask her what her citizenship is.
American citizen, born in Berkeley, California.
Mr. Parsons?
American citizen, born in New Jersey.
Okay, Ms. Mangajas?
I'm a naturalized Filipino.
Mr. Arturo Ocampo?
I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen from Mexico.
Okay. Now, at least Mr. Ocampo mentioned the word that you two didn't mention. Saying that you're an American citizen doesn't mean anything. I would like to inform you that you are U.S. citizens and not American citizens. Okay?
I guess the point being that it's all North America.
The slang that we utilize, though, is very acceptable.
But the thing is that if you go to a foreign country and you say you're an American citizen, that doesn't mean anything. You have to be specific as to what your citizenship is.
Just goes to show you can learn something new every day.
Okay. But I'm here, there are many things on this bill that Governor Wilson is proposing, many of them that I detest, one of them being that of taking the status away from infant children who are born in this country, among other things. But I'm concerned about the broader bill as a whole, because it lends to everybody having an ID card and all that. That's an Orwellian characteristic, and like Big Brother watching you. And I'm just wondering to myself, do we really want that? Everybody talks about how much the undocumented and the documented or immigrants in this country are really costing us. I would like to ask this question with this comment. With the millions of dollars during the Republican era that brought us up into the trillions of indebtedness in this country that maybe our great-great-great-grandchildren will never pay off, to the state of California right now, of all the many counties that there are in the state of California, where the state is taking monies away from the counties to help pay for programs, all right? Asking the counties to cut back, which the counties have done, and the counties as a whole have dropped 6,000 positions so that they won't have those encumbrances within their budget. And yet the state, during the same time, increased 3,000 new positions for the state. To me, that's not being conservative with respect to budgeting. Another thing is this.
We need to keep it brief.
All right.
Okay.
I'll stop at that.
Okay.
Don. John, do you have teenage children?
My children are all grown, but I do have teenage grandchildren.
So you had teenagers that went through the school system. When they went to high school, did they work?
Some did and some didn't.
Did they have to get a work permit?
Never.
Okay, let me clue you in on one little thing here. You know, a lot of times teenagers that go to high school, they are 16, 17 years of age. They want to go to work. They have to get a work permit. I don't consider that Orwellian or intrusive, and what we're talking about here is much the same thing. And the last thing, I'm going to resist the impulse to say something political, but the last thing you're ever going to get me to call the state legislature is conservative.
Okay. I'd like to make this comment. When I was a young man growing up and I needed money and I started working in the fields when I was 13 years old. And I worked in the fields when my son had to go to Santa Clara. We both worked in the fields to earn him the money, and he was just a young man, and we saved the money and we sent him through and he graduated. And all my other sons, whoever needed it, and we needed fast money. If the crops were in, we went to where the crops were because we knew that was an immediate job and we didn't have to go pounding on doors. And sometimes I think that there's just too damn much control by the state and the federal government that wants to tell people what the hell to do. And I think that that's wrong because of the fact that they're going and they're thinking about what happened to the mines in England when they're taking 9-year-old boys and setting them in those mines. That, I think, is where all this bull came from. But here in California, I don't think we have a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to limit the questions to 1 minute, okay? We're getting a little
Oh, you're going to get
here.
in trouble. Talk to the mayor about that one.
Okay.
I think it was Kathy that said something about why don't some of these immigrants who come to this country make money, why don't they just stay in Mexico or wherever they come from and develop the economic conditions in that country. I'm not sure if I really caught all of that exactly right. But, you know, what I want to know is how come none of you have addressed the extent that the U.S. economic policies affect the economic conditions in the bordering nations and how that has affected the push-pull factors of people who immigrate to the United States?
I think in all fairness that you didn't summarize what I had stated very well because I was talking specifically about refugee populations, 17 million refugees that we will take only a fraction of and that we could utilize the money better to spend in their home countries improving their conditions there. I was speaking of refugees and maybe I didn't make myself clear when I was stating that. There definitely are push-pull factors and I would be the first to tell you that you can't blame people for seeking a better life. The whole thing is that we are a country of laws, just like the majority of other countries are. And we just can't accept everyone.
Why are we spending so much time and money trying to keep them there instead of spending some of that time, money, and energy in trying to develop those conditions so that it isn't just for the benefit of our businessmen, but also for the benefit of the people of this state and the people of those countries?
I agree with you.
Okay. Next question.
In order to keep this thing moving, I got 2 questions and 2 observations.
Okay.
Okay.
As long as it's under a minute.
My name is Richard Soto. I'm from Tracy. And I have 2 questions. One is for Mr. Parson. I believe that's your name. Are you on AFDC? Are you on AFDC?
Not as of this morning.
Okay, thank you. Because that goes back to the point of the statement you had made about the number of people that were on AFDC, which leads to some of the points that were made by other people on the panel, that these people are exploited. For that reason, they have to go on AFDC. So evidently, you're gainfully employed and don't have to go on AFDC and can take care of some needs. But the exploited people have no other options. Second, the question is for Ms. Turner, I believe. Okay. You had made some comments about statistics and data on the number of illegal aliens within the last couple of years. Do you have any statistics on the number of illegal aliens coming from the East Coast prior to 1849?
Prior to 1849, the laws of our countries were also different, but you wouldn't believe...
Well, it was a different country, wasn't it?
It was a different country.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Parson, you also made an observation that 77% of the people that were polled in regards to being in favor of illegals or non-illegals, and I'm just wondering if that's an extremely interesting percentage, and I'm wondering if 70% of what, and second, how you got 77% when even the pollsters can't even get that high of a number of Hispanics that are registered and participate in voting on a regular basis. So you come up with a 77% data.
It was a field poll, wasn't it?
It was. I'm a little bit more familiar than I think than Don is, but it was a field poll, which is they do research polling, and it's based out of San Francisco, and they do it statewide, and it's a random survey poll.
It's based on
Do you know how many
sampling.
people?
Do you know what the sample was?
I don't have the sample.
Generally speaking, pollsters select a demographically representative sample. I believe the field poll is 1,200 samples statewide.
Well, that's significant, 1,200. Okay, and then my last observation is that, in my opinion, the only person that has made any real sound observations and brought any kind of light to this discussion tonight has been Mr. Ocampo, who has asked the question, is this really a problem? And also has made the observation that if we're looking at the way that the illegal immigrant or the undocumented person is taking advantage of the Southwest, why are they here? The question has been asked over and over again. Why are they here? You know, I don't think any of us would be anywhere if we weren't employed. And we need to go back to one of the solutions that was brought up, is the people that are hiring illegals and exploiting them, that's where we need to be. Not at the person who is being exploited, taken advantage of, them, their children, so forth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Ricardo, if I can make two quick comments on that. There's one real interesting thing on the polls about what people think, and I don't know who they polled to the demographics, because Naleo did a poll and they polled Latinos, and 81% of the polled opposed Wilson's recent proposal. 71 said that anti-immigrant sentiment could result in violence. 73% said believe undocumented contribute positively to California, so apparently they missed a lot of the Latinos. Same thing I want to point out real quick is that one of the myths is that all of a sudden this country is being overrun by immigrants. Yeah, I believe it was in, I may not have this exactly right, but I believe it was in about 1910, 15% of the national population were immigrants. Today, it's something like 8%. You know, obviously there are more people in the country, but to the degree that it's a problem is something that is really open debate.
NALEO, by the way, is National Association of Latino Elected Officials, right? Don, Kathy?
Well, I mean, 1910 and the immigrant population, 1910, the frontier settled, as I said before. I maybe have too many of these little catchy phrases, but the population is much more vast. I mean, we're finding right now that our education systems can't handle the amount of students we have. So numbers have a different impact when you have more people. And again, with some of the studies, some of the reasons I haven't talked about a lot of studies is because quite often when you have studies, you have someone who's come to a conclusion before they've ever done any of the research.
Okay, next question.
My name's Tumwa Song, and I'm naturalization. And also, before I become naturalization, I'm a refugee. And seems like the issue we argument tonight, it seems like a discrimination immigrant, and I feel uncomfortable with that. And my questions to Kathy, I heard that she mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting tonight, she said that immigration causes economic sanction. I know that it is, but not immigrant. And I feel that if she said that immigrant caused the economic sanction in the United States here, so what about everybody in the United States here? Are we immigrant? Are you immigrant too? Or your parents immigrant to the United States here too? Or what about Christopher Columbus? When he came discover the United States here, America, was him illegal or legal? I think this is the country good opportunity to search for the bright future.
Okay.
And so I think other people, they have the right to search bright future for their right, human rights too.
Is there a backlash against immigrants right now?
That was an interesting way of summarizing that question. is there a backlash against immigrants? I haven't seen a backlash against immigrants. I think addressing your question, one of the causes I think of maybe that could create a backlash are people not being careful in making a distinction between legal and illegal immigration, that they're putting all immigrants together. And Mr. Song, is that the right
yes,
name?
that's my point.
Okay.
I was agree with Alina early. We should focus on what the immigration is, that all general immigration, or maybe Mexico or Mexican or Asian. That's why I was feel upset when you say immigrant cause economic sanction, and I don't think that's right. That's a kind of discrimination about immigrants.
It's important to make the distinctions between the classes of immigrants.
I think you should point out that is it illegal cause or just immigration cause, because that make the issue that everybody feel upset. And I feel really upset too, but I think that all we are immigration. Also Christopher, when he discovered America, I think he's illegal too.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Let me hit a couple of points that I think are important, Mr. Song. Number one, I think the thing that a lot of people in this room are concerned about when you start talking about backlash, there is a fear that there will be a backlash. The best way to deal with that fear is to get the facts out on the table. Mr. Ocampo's mentioned, we've mentioned the fact that all of the figures are not clear, and certainly more work needs to be done to clarify them, but there are some basic things that we think underlie at least the philosophy.
We need to get to the next question.
That I believe that, but when the Stockton rocket came out, I feel like it's kind of discrimination.
Well,
I feel that should focus on what is illegal, or that will be my issue that we should focus on. But if we mention about immigration, I think that's out of line. I feel that it's not appropriate to be the politic or whatever point for to bring this on the argument.
Thanks. We need
all
to get to the next
of our
question.
statistics tonight have been to discuss illegal immigration. One of the things that we're trying to deal with here. If we focus on any particular group, then I think that we open ourselves up for charges of discrimination. We've tried to keep this in the context of legal versus illegal, rather than focusing on any specific ethnic group. It's important to recognize that the United States of America accepts twice as many legal immigrants than any other country in the world combined.
And and when the problem set in this whole population of immigrants, there's finger pointing and there's going to be witch hunting. And I think that's what getting into the core of a refugee who has turned into a naturalized citizen at this point in time.
All right, we need to get
Parsons.
to the next question. Okay?
All right. My name is Joe Yang. I'm a Delta College student, and I'm glad to be here tonight because it was very interesting. But I want to point it out because I'm really concerned about immigration fact, because earlier, Kathy and Elena mentioned about a distinction between illegal immigrant and legal immigrant, but they barely mentioned about there's a distinction about the illegal immigrant too, because it seemed to me that the Governor Wilson and the media seem to put all illegal immigrants on the same boat. But I believe that they have to make a more closely study, because there are many different cases of illegal immigrants. Why they're here? Have you ever asked this question too? And earlier somebody asked this question, and I believe this is really important, because if we put all illegal immigrants on the same boat, it's not right. So many people here come here because they are searching for political asylums. Some people for education freedom, for persecution, or so many reasons. So we cannot put all illegal immigrants in the same boat. And the reason I really disagree with Peter Wilson, because the first thing I really disagree with him, because he want to deny the citizenship for the born baby in United States from illegal immigrant. And I think that it's, first of all, unconstitutional. And secondly, I don't think it's right to let those babies bear the consequence that the parents did, because they didn't do anything. And I don't think this is right for them to bear all those consequences.
Okay, your question is?
My question is I just wanted to state that why you guys, we represent Viet, but the question I'm asking, I don't think, do you really think that Governor Wilson really care about the economics or how the welfare of people. I think he's only care about his election for the next election in the campaign that he's running for. And he target on the illegal immigrant because he know that they don't have the right to vote. So if he pick on Democrat or all the people, they have the right to vote, so they won't vote for him. So it's the only way he target on illegal immigrant because he know that those people cannot do anything. So I want to answer.
Okay. Don, is this political opportunism?
Well, if it's political opportunism, then it's an infection on both sides of the aisle. We've talked about the bipartisan character of the debate all night long. The fact is that Senator Boxer, Senator Feinstein, Governor Wilson, and other legislators have all recognized that the public is very concerned about the question of illegal immigration. So to single out one particular legislator and say that person is simply doing it to further their own particular political agenda or their re-election campaign, I think is a bit of a reach.
Okay, we need to move on to the next question. Arturo, you had a comment.
No, I just wanted to state that what it basically is history repeating itself. It happened in 1907, 1927 to 1935, 1947, 1954, 1974, 1981, and then 1993. And I think Don's right. It's not just Governor Wilson. It's the Democrats are jumping on it as well. And all of them should be asked to supply the data, the hard data, that supports the contentions that they're making, that justifies the expense of taxpayer money that they wanted to incur for a problem that we don't even know, and most studies suggest doesn't exist.
Okay, I'm going to cut it off after the woman in the green blouse, okay? Okay, after the gentleman in the brown shirt. But we've got to move on. Because these panelists are getting awfully tired. We were only supposed to be here an hour. And let's keep your questions limited to a minute.
Okay, my name's Jose Urbina, and I agree with the young lady that spoke before me. I think the whole issue is political motivated. And my question to you is, if this has been such a big problem, and if it's a bipartisan, if there's bipartisan in this, why hasn't there been any solutions? Any logical solutions?
Yeah.
I think there have been solutions, and one thing I want to state is FAIR is a nonpartisan group. We don't get involved in partisan politics, and in California they have dealt with it on a bipartisan level. The legislation that was introduced by Democrats, Republicans, and members of the Independent Party. So there are solutions that are being sought. There were over 30 bills to reduce the impacts of illegal immigration on the state level. There is more than that on the federal level to deal with immigration, both legal and illegal immigration. They're in the process. Only when the public really makes a lot of noise about issues do politicians start really working hard on them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Irene Andes, Lodi. Kathy, in regards to FAIR, the reason that we're here tonight is because of the assertion that immigrants are a drain on the economy. So far tonight, you and Mr. Parsons have been stating and reading lots of statistics to substantiate that. Now, on the other hand, we have Mr. Ocampo, who's an authority on immigration. He's researched those numbers, and he states and he's found them to be inflated and based on inaccuracies. Also, in the last week or several days, the Stockton Record has done their inquiries, and they stated today that there simply are no facts to substantiate your numbers. Now, in view of that, why are you standing by these numbers, and why is the governor still stating that immigrants are a big drain on the budget? And if you still stand by that statement, where are your numbers? Can you give us your studies?
I have lots of studies.
But the question is, who do we believe?
Who are studies? California Auditor General. This took 2 years to do. The methodology, some of it's been questioned, but you know what? It's nonpartisan study. One of the other studies that was done was the LA County study on all immigrants, and it actually is interested. The study was started by Supervisor Molina, and the people that were involved in this study were from all opinions. I mean, everyone was involved. MALDEF was involved in this study. Urban Institute was involved in this study. Professor Hayes Batista, I mean, you name it. Everyone was involved in this study. They're done through methodologies. I think that you need, like Arturo, there are studies on the other side, but I think that you need to look at the dates of most of his studies. All the studies in the last couple of years have stated the same thing. Illegal immigration costs California. These are the two big studies, the two biggest studies. The Urban Institute recent study that even attacked the LA study, they had a word in the LA study. And then they used, they didn't even do a full study. They did an analysis is what they did. And I think you need to look at the facts. I study immigration issues. I study all the polls. I study the reports. I'm probably one of the few people who has actually read all of this and the methodology. I am not a statistician. I don't know what is correct methodology. I've done RAND study. We've done RAND studies. I mean, there's all sorts of information. The question is, you've already come to a conclusion. You're already going to decide which facts you're going to accept versus those which you're not going to accept. And you've decided that you will accept Arturo's figures and not our figures.
Dodo.
If I can, I don't know if Kathy's read the LA study, because if you read the entire LA study, it states that undocumented persons paid $904 million in all taxes, but only used $676 in county services. They paid more in than was taken out. That, to me, doesn't indicate that they're a burden on the economy. Now, in all fairness, what the LA study did not do was count how much was used in federal and state taxes. Most of us know that most services are done through the county, and there's very little in federal and state taxes. But the obvious question is, why didn't they do that? And the obvious reason is, the reason the LA study, one thing you have to look at when you talk about studies is not only the date, but who commissioned the study and why the study was commissioned. She's only mentioned 2 studies so far. The LA study was done by the County of LA for the reason and the purpose to obtain reimbursement from the federal government. You are not going to underestimate a cost when you're seeking reimbursement. The other study she didn't mention was the Huddle study, which is a national study. Who commissioned the Huddle study? It was commissioned by the Carrying Capacity Network, which is a zero population growth organization, which has openly lobbied for a stop to immigration or to a limitation in immigration. That is a group that's very closely collected to FAIR. So one thing you need to do is, when you look at the studies, is, for one, read the whole thing. The other thing you need to do when you look at the studies is who commissioned the study and why was it commissioned? Because the studies that indicate otherwise are studies that are done by the federal government, that are done by the state, by the Senate, by the state Senate office of the Senate office of the state. The other thing you got to realize that of all the studies that I mentioned there's about 26 studies. Only 2 or 3 of them are mentioned by FAIR, and one of them doesn't even indicate what they say. Okay. But the other thing is, of the studies that I have cited, no one has criticized those studies for bad methodology. Economists and numerous economists and demographers have criticized the studies that FAIR cites because they are just simply poorly done and overestimate costs.
Real brief.
Okay. Arturo, I think actually I have the letter where LA Study actually commissioned the LA study, and it's by Gloria Molina and Supervisor Molina, and the reason that they commissioned the study was to prove that all immigrant classes contribute more to the economy than they take out. So I think you are actually incorrect in that. Furthermore, you stated that they contribute more. They looked at revenues on all levels, federal, state, and local revenues. They only looked at costs as county costs. So I think next time you state that maybe I haven't read the whole report, you should maybe ask me a further question.
Very quickly.
Okay.
The reason the LA study was done because the federal government owes counties and the states SLEAC funds. That is the reason these studies have been done.
Okay.
And in regards to the numbers, again, she hasn't refuted the numbers that I put out. They have put more in than they have taken out. And some of the things that they haven't looked at in regards in this study is they didn't even count the contributions made by businesses owned by immigrants. When that is factored in, it even goes higher.
Let's save it for the closing remarks. Okay, Elena, briefly.
I had offered earlier copies of what I have here and what we've been using, the statistics that you've been hearing. But let me show you a distinction. This is a report from Governor Wilson's office, and this is an objective report from other people. Just by mere title alone, let me show you what the difference is. This says here, California's overwhelming illegal, take the word overwhelming, illegal immigration burden. Two words that are already preset with premises. The objective study says use of public services by immigrants. You'll find the difference in the perspective, and then you use your judgment, and you can tell that no matter what numbers are being presented to you in any type of discussion about immigration, I think it still shows that the benefits still outweigh the cost. More importantly, the studies are more objective and are stated in a more objective manner for those who are pro on this issue.
Okay.
General.
Well, I think in this state, if I'm not mistaken, half of the state budget is taken up by education. I would consider that a fairly significant commitment. Are you looking for something more specific than that?
Yes, in regard, do you believe that everyone should be educated?
I think everyone should have the opportunity for an education. I think, however, that benefit should accrue to people who are in this country legally.
Children who are born in this country are legally. They are citizens of the United States of America. And my second question is, why in this law do you want to punish innocent children by condemning them into ignorance, by denying the right of education?
I think she's referring to Governor Wilson's proposal to deny educational benefits to undocumented immigrants.
My stance on education with the children would be this. As of January 1, 1994, everyone who's here gets a free education. But after that, people who enter the country illegally shall not receive education. It's a hard question to answer, but right now, under current federal law, and it is federal law, so it's an academic conversation we're having right here, because the Supreme Court has said that every person, every child is guaranteed education through high school. But right now in the United States, a free education is guaranteed to everyone in the whole entire world. All they have to do is get here.
My comment is that I believe strongly that every citizen, every human being has the right to be educated. If we deny education to children, men, women, regardless of where they come from, origin, or age, it's going back to slavery. And slavery was abolished by President Lincoln. And the reason for slavery was to keep them ignorant so they could not speak or defend for themselves. I think you want to take us back to the Dark Ages. And it's evident that by supporting this law that you want to pass, is political, is biased, is racist, and is discriminatory to every citizen of this country and every citizen of the world that wish to come. And it's also a violation of the human rights and civil rights of people.
Okay, Don.
I think all of us have tried very hard tonight to stay away from throwing around labels that are inflammatory to try and incite
certain feelings in people. One of the things that I commented on earlier is that a lot of people that are in this room tonight are fearful of a backlash as a consequence of the enactment of certain of these provisions. I think that labels and inflammatory rhetoric do nothing but exacerbate that fear and make it more difficult to have a reasoned political dialogue on the issue. The issue as I see it is immigrant children cost education in the state of California $5.3 billion according to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. That's $5.3 billion that doesn't go into police, that doesn't go into libraries, that doesn't go into transportation, that doesn't go into solving all of the other problems that we have in the state. And the question is, the question that Kathy raises is, can we continue to be a magnet for the entire world? And I think people are beginning to recognize, certainly 85% of the people surveyed in the field poll, that there are limits.
We contacted the Department of Education and asked them why they didn't come out with the number of undocumented children in the schools. And they said the reason is nobody knows in the state of California how many undocumented children there are in the schools. There's no way that the governor could have figured out what it costs and how many of them there are in there. The other point that needs to be brought out is some undocumented children are children of parents who are legal residents of the United States. So to deny an undocumented child an education when he's going to be immigrated anyways is something, it's a ridiculous and poorly thought out plan, because what's going to happen is that child will reach the age of 18, will be immigrated by his parents at some point, and he would not have gotten an education. And that person who will then be legally in this country will be probably someone who will not be employed. So the cost is something that people really haven't thought out. The costs are going to be greater. The other thing is, the reality is, and again, the studies indicate this, and there's no studies that indicate contrary, that the reason people come here is not to go to school, they come to get jobs. So even if we were to cut off education for these children, people would still be coming here. And the reality is what we would end up having is a group of undocumented persons that are not being educated, that are even driven further into the underground. And that, in the long run, will be much more expensive to the state of California than educating them.
My last comment, that instead of punishing children and trying to exclude them and send them back as you want to, why don't you concentrate on healing some of the problems that we have in education? For example, building more schools.
Okay. You'll have an opportunity to do something on the ballot this year. The majority rule for, or the majority vote for school bonds is on the ballot. So if you want to reduce the requirement from 2/3 to 50% to build more schools, that's up to the voters this fall.
Okay, one last question. One more,
That's the guy.
Buenas noches a la audiencia, a los panelistas. Mi nombre es Luis Magaña.
Good evening, panelists.
Yo nomás quiero darles que paren de usar la palabra ilegal. Yo nunca he oído el ser humano es ilegal. No tiene documentos, pero nunca es ilegal en ninguna parte de este mundo.
I want to impose upon the panel to quit calling the illegal illegal. He's a human being, and there's no boundaries for a human being being a human being.
Otra cuestión a los organizadores de este foro del pueblo. Es una lástima que todos los trabajadores del campo y muchos que no hablan español, al llegar a las tiendas compraran el periódico, al ver sus fotos, al verse retratados, y que no los incluyeran ni una nota en español para haberlos invitado a este foro.
It's a shame that the organization that started this forum did not include the illegal here as a panelist or as a member of the audience. So therefore, the rhetoric that's going on is only going on between nothing but legal people.
That's a good point.
Una cuestión, algo para mi pregunta, para terminar, algo muy rápido. Un sí, un no o no me contestan a cada uno de los 4 panelistas. ¿Ustedes creen que con el Tratado de Libre Comercio se va a detener la migración, sí o no?
So all 4 of you on the panel, do you think that NAFTA will hold back the immigration? Yes or no?
Comience nomás un sí o no.
Yes or no?
Just a yes or no answer is what he wants.
Kathy?
Yes and no. How's that?
Yes or
In the short term, all studies done on NAFTA said illegal immigration, and I'm sorry I used that word, but that's the legal term used in our documents. Illegal immigration will increase, but in the long term it will decrease.
I think in the long run it probably will not, no.
No, I don't believe it will.
NAFTA will bring the low-skills job, concentrate the low-skills job in Mexico. It's an opportunity, no matter what you call it. It will upgrade our educational system here because now we can focus our education on giving higher skills to our people and serving their needs for more future use. So NAFTA is going to be good for all the short and the long-term purposes.
Bueno, yo vengo de un pueblo rural donde la riqueza en México está concentrada en unas pocas manos. Esa concentración se debe a que no hay una real democracia y no llega las oportunidades a mi pueblo rural, donde yo vengo y donde se está viniendo mucha gente, especialmente a este condado San Joaquín. Entonces, ¿cómo es posible que un tratado de libre comercio vaya a poner plantas, fábricas de donde se está produciendo la migración y donde no hace falta una verdadera democracia?
Can we get a translation?
Yes, I come from a very poor rural area in my state where the wealth is only concentrated by a few individuals. It's because of the fault of a democratic system. Now, how could NAFTA bring in jobs and everything to that area when a lot of people are coming over to the United States to take advantage of what's offered here?
Any answers?
Beyond the expertise of FAIR.
Yeah, I don't think we have a NAFTA expert on the panel.
You know, it's funny because one of the groups that I'm involved with is taking a look at NAFTA, but I have to confess to you, I haven't read the proposal.
Yo incluí NAFTA porque se está hablando, lo están utilizando como que va a detener la migración. Por eso les hice esa pregunta. Y si ustedes están preocupados en la cuestión de migración y sus gobernantes, tanto de México como de aquí, están hablando que se va a detener la migración, yo creo que ustedes debe ser un tema que deben de tener en mente, ¿verdad?
You should be educated as far as NAFTA is concerned because it does affect immigration as a whole, and you should be literate enough to know that NAFTA is being discussed in the federal government and our system. You should be versed on that.
Okay.
I actually, I don't know how many of you are really familiar how big the NAFTA document is. I'm probably one of the people who actually has the whole NAFTA document, and it's about that big. And I've read through part of it, but it is a huge document. It's got all sorts of technical language in it. The official position of FAIR is that we neither support or oppose NAFTA, that we believe that when you have a side agreements on labor and environment, that you have to have a side agreement on immigration. In fact, the Latino National Forum has also taken a very similar position that they need to have a side agreement on immigration.
Next question.
Thank you.
Next and last question.
Okay, my name is Bao Nguyen. I came here to find out the truth. I have a friend that came to the United States 3 years ago with a visa, but I don't understand why they can't apply for a green card to stay in the United States.
CRLA might be able to answer this better, but what status was your visa?
Visa.
A student visa?
Yes.
I mean, there's different... B2.
Someone comes on a visa, why can't they get a green card?
Another misconception is CRLA does not do immigration petitions. We do immigrants' rights cases. So in terms of the petitions, how petitions are processed and why they're not processed, we wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Kathy, do you know?
I'm more of a policy person. I'm not an immigration attorney. Immigration law is very complicated, and there are lots of different INS documents.
If you're interested in, we have a list of referral agencies that can do some advice for a very, very low fee. If you'd like to have them call us, that, I mean, if there's a question he has, he should get it answered as soon as possible.
Okay, I have a question for Atlanta. You told us that you came to United States 13 years ago, right? Okay, how would you feel if you're illegal right now? What would you do?
If I were illegal at this point in time,
If you're in the same situation as my friend, everybody.
how would I feel with the midst of this discussion? I would still be talking positive about the benefits that any immigrant, legal or illegal, brings to this country. And to summarize what has already been said here about the benefits, coming here, let's make the final distinction. As a legal immigrant, you have to prove to the U.S. government that you are not likely to become a public charge, and that's being legal. By being illegal, undocumented immigrants are unlikely to approach government authorities for services for fear of being discovered. Instead, they go and seek the job. So those are the basic things, facts that I can speak to you. If I were illegal here, I find a way to be legal. For one, that's a practical thing to do. And secondly, I will still sit here and listen to all this discussion because I would like the basic reason to come out. Is this being used as a scapegoat for all the other things that remain unsolved, say, two Republican administrations that had plummeted the economy of California, or is there something more sensible out of this?
Okay.
What are we talking?
We need to cut it off here.
Okay, one more. Since you work for INS, you should help immigrant people, because after all, you are not American. You are still immigrant. You are still Filipino.
No one
I
on the
do not
panel
work
works
for the INS. I'm very sorry.
Well, you got together, right?
No, nobody on the panel is from INS. Okay, thank you. Well, listen, we're coming to the conclusion. I wanted to thank the panel for hanging in there, and I'm going to ask each of you to make a brief closing statement. Why don't we started at that end last time? Why don't we hopscotch around? Elena, you want to start?
Just as a closing statement, I do believe that the U.S. immigration policy is rational, regulated, and beneficial. And I do believe that there are systems in place through the Department of Labor, through the Department of Justice, that safeguard the laws of the land. But what affects me as an immigrant is truly the backlash of all this discussion, because on one hand, we have spent many years building towards assimilation and making sure that we can show contribution instead of negative effects in this country. And here we are back again, and Arturo had mentioned all the years that we had trouble with immigration. California is a state that prides itself on racial and ethnic tolerance. But the sad fact is that it's bursting at the seams right now from too much rapid growth, increase in population, much of it from immigration. It's a fact that 75% of immigrants or transferees from other states of this country during the 90s were foreign born. It's also a fact that immigrants fill the low-paying jobs and keep the domestic industry competitive, Mr. Magana. Non-immigrants who are out of work are resentful at this time, even if they do not want the jobs that the immigrants take. Meanwhile, immigrants who do provide a tax benefit to this nation through Social Security and taxes that are being paid flow directly to Washington, while the health costs and all those other things are being felt at the local level and concentrated where these immigrant groups concentrate. Left with this issue now of cost to California versus benefit to California in this argument, where there are no hard facts, where we've been beating around the same bush over and over today, the facts that are being presented there are half as reliable.
The governor is saying without substantiation, or he will lose his defense, that immigrants are a burden to the state or to the country in general. I do believe that immigrants have made their contributions and will not falter in any way in this aspect. And that's the pride that we bring to this country.
Thank you,
Stop
Elena.
the belly aching. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Don.
Belly aching. Federally mandated services to illegal immigrants cost California taxpayers nearly $3 billion a year. That's $3 billion that can't be spent on education. That's $3 billion that can't be spent on health care or other services for California's legal residents. None of us sitting here dispute the contribution that immigrants have made to this country. As Kathy said at the beginning of her presentation, 97% of the people who came here from somebody else, came here from somewhere else. There was one gentleman tonight that was an American Indian who spoke, and he probably has the closest claim to being a naturalized citizen in the room, unless you accept the premise that they crossed over the ice pack from the Soviet Union. The point is that the question of illegal immigration has to be addressed, and this governor has taken, has demonstrated political courage in confronting the issue in not a piecemeal fashion as other politicians have, but with a broad spectrum of reforms designed to address the multi-level scope of the problem.
Thank you, Don. Arturo.
Yes, in my opinion, it doesn't take courage to do what is popular. I mean, and that is what he's done. The reality is there are a lot of myths about undocumented persons as well as recent immigrants. Wilson and others have led people to believe that they receive welfare. His own documents indicate they do not receive welfare. U.S. citizen children that they may have, of course, do, but they have the right as anybody else who is a U.S. citizen. The studies that have not been criticized and have had put holes in them are the ones that state that they, in fact, are a boon and not a burden. So if they're not costing us anything, why are we spending so much time and so much money to deal with a problem that probably doesn't exist? When the numbers as to how much they cost the state, again, every time we've asked the state to produce the documentation to prove their numbers, they've been unable to do so. A little over $3 billion, the cost of undocumented workers is what they're alleging. We believe it's exaggerated. It's estimated that the S&L crisis is going to cost California taxpayers $50 billion. Wilson would prefer to deal with an issue that most people believe to be exaggerated of a little over $3 billion. That doesn't seem to be where our priority should be. The very sad thing about Wilson's proposals is that every one of his proposals will primarily affect children. They will not be allowed to go to school. Health care, according to several studies and confirmed by the Stockton Record survey, indicates that most of the undocumented folks that seek health care are children. An 8-year-old little boy is going to be denied health care. The right to obtain U.S. citizenship because you're born in this country, again, a child. Children do not have any control over where they are, where they're going to be born, what country they're going to live in. It seems that we want to put all the blame not only on undocumented, but on the children of undocumented for the alleged transgressions of their parents. The reason undocumented come to California, if we assume it is a problem, is because of jobs. Wilson and others have addressed different things, none that have, by any study, by anyone, have indicated is a magnet for undocumented persons. The only magnet that everyone is in agreement is jobs. Yet he has not addressed jobs. What he needs to do, like I had said earlier, is enforce the labor laws, increase the minimum wage to livable wage. That might be a disincentive for hiring undocumented workers. The reason I suspect he hasn't done that is that will not be very popular. There are a lot of other myths about undocumented persons. Everyone thinks that they're poor and that they're uneducated, etc. Many of us who have worked with undocumented, I've worked with undocumented for at least the last 15 years, and I can give you a list of thousands, well not thousands, hundreds of persons who are sons of undocumented and who are undocumented themselves, who are college students with 4.0s, who are lawyers or doctors or journalists, administrators, bank presidents, doctors and nurses. These are not folks that are necessarily coming and creating poverty. The last thing I want to mention is something that was stated by demographer Jorge Bustamante, who's been studying immigration for 20 years and is considered as one of the world's best experts on the study. He was quoted as saying that the flow of undocumented workers is a mutually beneficial exchange, a transaction driven by the laws of supply and demand. The immigrants receive a higher paying job, a chance to build a future to hope. The employer in turn gets a perfect employee, a worker who has no rights, who can't complain, etc., etc. The reality is that the need for cheap labor is as real here as the need for employment is in Mexico. Now, I'm not saying that we should allow that to continue, because the sad thing is that the only real victim in this entire discussion is the undocumented worker. He is or she is the one that's being abused, being taken advantage of, and the beneficiary of that are Californians and other Americans.
Okay, thank you, Arturo. Kathy.
I think one of the best signs that I've read on this is an Indian reservation in Montana, and it said if we had only had better immigration laws, none of us would be here discussing this tonight. This was the Indian reservation prior to the Mexicans settling California, but I don't want to get into comment. This is my chance to make a closing statement. I think it's real important, and I know that Elena opened up with this too, to make the distinction between legal and illegal immigration. It's an important distinction to make. And when people start talking about immigrants, they're the ones that are doing the bashing on the legal immigrants. They're hurting the legal immigrants by including them with the people who are illegally here. Clearly, the majority of all people that reside in the United States agree on this issue. One of the biggest polls done called with Latinos, broken up in a separate group, was called the Latino National Political Survey, and it found that more than 75.2% of Mexicans, 79.4% of Puerto Ricans, and it was about 74% of all others thought that there were too many immigrants, and this was both legal and illegal immigrants coming to the United States. So clearly there is consensus on this issue. We need to work constructively, not destructively, to solutions. And that's what forums like this are for. There's lots of facts and figures about there. I disagree with Arturo that he keeps on talking about all these studies. He's yet to cite one. I think that furthermore that he is incorrect that they have not been questioned, some of the studies he's talking about. But we need to keep it in perspective. Illegal immigration is against the law. The United States is a country of law. We have law and order in this country, or we try to maintain law and order. Now, people who are immigrating against the law are in violation of the law. People who are in favor of illegal immigration are in truth, open border advocates. They do not believe that we should have a border in the United States. They do not believe the United States has the right to sovereignty. And I think that's where I'd like to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we come to the end. I want to thank the panelists for their patience, for their ability to be articulate and reasonable. And I want to thank the audience for a whole lot of good questions. I think we furthered the debate here. I think we furthered knowledge. And if we prompted questions, that's okay too. I think Virgil wants to make a closing statement, but thank you very much for showing up.
I too would like to thank the panelists for an outstanding job, and thank all of you for coming this evening. And most importantly, I'd like to recognize Ricardo Pimentel, the managing editor for the Stockton Record. Many of you don't know that Ricardo has been promoted within Gannett, and he's going to be leaving the Stockton Record. It's a great loss for us here in Stockton and San Joaquin County. Ricardo is going to be moving on to Tucson, Arizona. He's going to be the #1 executive editor for the Tucson Citizen, which is an outstanding paper in Tucson, Arizona. And I want to wish Ricardo publicly the very, very best, because we have thoroughly enjoyed working with Ricardo. So if you would give Ricardo a nice hand. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. On behalf of Continental Cablevision and the Stockton Record, we thank you and bid you good night.
Inches, and in the foothills 0.90 inches near Camino. ETO rates for the following summer stations for Davis yesterday 0.17, Nicholas 0.10, and Camino 0.11 inches. For more information concerning the use of these rates, contact your local farm advisor. Sunset tonight 5:01, sunrise Sunday 6:39.
This is radio weather KEC 57, operated by the National Weather Service in downtown Sacramento, broadcasting on a frequency of 162.55 megahertz from our transmitter located near Jackson, California. Here's the 3 to 5 day extended outlook for the period Tuesday through Thursday. Increasing clouds on Tuesday with a slight chance of showers spreading down from the northwest. Daytime highs will range from the upper 50s to the mid 60s, and the overnight lows will range from the 30s to the mid 40s. On Wednesday, scattered showers, cool, unsettled weather. Daytime highs will range from
The following is a paid advertisement brought to you by American Harvest.
American Harvest presents the Harvest-Made Snack Master Dehydrator.
Welcome to American Harvest Presents. I'm Dave Dornbush, and we're going to spend some time looking at yet another exciting product, the American Harvest Food Dehydrator. Now you're saying, oh, what's a food dehydrator? Let me tell you, but first of all, let me show you what it can do for you and your family. It can save you money, it can improve your health and nutrition, and you can have a lot of fun with it. We're going to go through several examples that'll prove this to you, I think, in the course of the show, and have some fun learning about how it works, what it does. Simply, it's home food storage, pure and simple. It's the easiest. It's so